Whispers of Secret Tales.
Eno's life changed forever the day her stepmother chased her into the forest. The fate of twin sisters at the mercy of a mother is both intriguing and suspense-filled.
In a far-off hamlet, tucked away in the central region of Ghana called Jukwa, a young family of four, including a couple and their twin daughters, lived a quiet life. When the twins turned 5 years old, their mother passed away from an ailment. Their father remarried another woman, but he was mysteriously unalived on one journey to the farm. The stepmother was envious of the love the man had for his daughters. The stepmother was horrible to the girls, envious of not being able to bear her own child. Somehow, when the twins were older in their 20s, the older twin sister fell into a well and passed away, quite unfortunately. Very mysterious to the village people. It would seem as if misfortune only had one destination. That was in Eno's life, the surviving twin younger sister, who was left alone with her unpleasant stepmother, Mama Esi. In the land of Jukwa, the prince would receive a gift from the ancestors to transform into a lion and give the animals the power to speak in the forest. This was knowledge only known to the queen and the chief servants of the prince and his guard. The prince, who was once in the forest one night, strutting around as a lion, heard the screams of a woman and quickly followed the direction of the sound and scared away an older woman chasing her, holding a glass bottle. Mama Esi was terrified upon seeing the gigantic lion. She quickly took to her heels, running back home. Eno, in a bid to get away from her stepmother, also fell into the same well her twin sister fell into. But fortunately, she was not badly hurt. The well was dry from the last incident to avoid any further tragedies. The prince, out of curiosity, roamed the forest wondering about the person who was being chased. He heard the screams that sounded familiar from earlier. He quickly morphed back into a human being when he felt closer to the sound of the screams. He realized someone was screaming from the inside of the empty well. He realized she was weak when he got closer. He rescued her and sent her to a small hut, which was his solitude away from the palace. She had lost consciousness by the time they arrived at the hut. She woke up with a terrible headache, regaining consciousness and gazing upon a woman sitting next to the bed. She was holding a wet towel. Eno became startled at first, afraid it was her stepmother. Then she quickly realized it was not, heaving a sigh of relief. The woman noticed that she was seeming a bit disturbed. She asked her not to be afraid, that she was safe, and that a man rescued her from the well and he will be back soon. The prince wore clothes that made him look like an ordinary man from the village. Eno had never seen the prince before, living a sheltered life since her childhood. Not even allowed to attend the procession of the king in the town square when that happened. She did not recognize him, thankfully. When the prince arrived, Eno was eternally grateful, as she profusely expressed to him, even in her weakness, even in his delight, that she was well and alive. The prince could not escape this nagging feeling of curiosity about why she was being chased late at night in that dark forest and who that woman was, which the lion scared away. He asked Eno in a very subtle and supportive voice, "Who was chasing you that night? And why were you out so late?" Eno heaved a sigh of relief, just knowing her stepmother was not in the room at that time. She proceeded to explain to the prince the demise of her family and how Mama Isi was the only family she had left, but she had experienced turmoil after turmoil since she was a child. That night was one of those nights where Mama Isi accused her of doing something that she had not done. This ended up in a situation where she chased her with that bottle into the dark forest. Eno continued to explain that before her stepmother, she lived a very quiet life with her family. She tried her best to earn her love, but to no avail. She proceeded to explain more what happened to her parents. After all she spoke about, the prince felt a lot of empathy for Eno. He admonished her to stay in the hut where she was safe. He asked to leave and mentioned that he would be back soon. Eno was very grateful, even though she wondered if her stepmother would come after her again. She still had a very deep sense of peace, knowing she was far away from her. It had been a few days since Eno and Mama Esi were roaming through the forest. Mama Esi, realizing that it had been a few days and Eno was nowhere to be found, she felt some form of inner happiness. Yet, she had to pretend to be worried because her neighbors also wondered where Eno was. She proceeded to go around and spread a story which she thought would move in her favor. She went around saying that she believed that Eno had encountered the lion who chased her and the lion had probably eaten her up. She pretended to be sad, weary, and needing support or comfort. The village people looked at her strangely. What she spoke of sounded very odd to them. One known man in the village, everybody looked at him as a drunkard. He proceeded to ask Mama Esi what she was doing at such an odd hour in the forest. Mama Esi claimed she went to look for Eno. He looked at her and called her a liar. Unbeknownst to Mama Esi, he was passing behind their huts that night. Eno disappeared and he heard loud screaming voices. But as usual, he was too drunk to make sense of all the noises he was hearing. It was later the next day when his mind actually chipped in that memory, and then he wondered to himself what was going on. He called Mama Esi wicked. He had known the family since the twins were born. He had his own life challenges and resorted to alcohol. Mama Esi, realizing that he might be onto something, was not willing to continue the conversation. She hurriedly left and went home. The prince went back to the palace and narrated the story to his mother, the queen. She was intrigued, as her empathetic heart was quite concerned. Days later, when the prince went back to see Eno, he went along with the queen, dressed in unassuming clothes. Eno had never seen the queen before. When the queen and the prince reached the hut, Eno looked at her, surprised that the man who had rescued her was with another woman. She quickly got up and greeted the woman. She greeted her back and asked her how she is doing. She introduced herself as the mother of the man who had saved her. The queen began to speak again, mentioning that her son had mentioned what had gone on and the situation which was explained to her about Esi and she Eno and what was going on that night in the forest. Eno, by the mention of her stepmother, Mama Esi, became frightened again, recounting that she had threatened her life. They calmed Eno down and made it very clear that they would ensure she is safe. They said their goodbyes and left. The prince over the next few days had spent more time with Eno, waiting for her full recovery, and began to feel certain feelings he had never felt before for a woman towards Eno. He admired her resilience and wit and her bubbly personality. She would recite interesting and intriguing proverbs her father had taught her as a child, in awe of the prince. Some weeks after, the prince and the queen returned for Eno to lead them back to her home, with the mind of trying to support her through this difficult situation of her relationship with her stepmother, Mama Esi. Eno hesitated. They encouraged her to be strong, and they all agreed to go after she got ready to go out of the hut. Before they opened the door, she picked up her stuff and led them out. As she opened the door, she realized there were many guards and maidens that numbered about 20 waiting behind the door. Eno was startled, and she asked, "What is going on? Has Mama Esi sent you people to come after me?" Saying in a terrified voice. The prince replied, "No, never will I let her have her way again with you." Eno stood confused. Then she asked, "Who are you then? And what do you really want from me?" Quivering. The queen asked her to calm down. She introduced herself again, properly this time, as the queen mother of Jukwa, and introduced her son as the prince of Jukwa, His Royal Majesty Prince Imber. Eno fell to her knees, astonished and afraid. The prince held her up and asked her not to be afraid. She quickly apologized for her tone in fear and asked for forgiveness. The queen told her there was nothing to apologize for. She instructed them to go, as Eno described the landmarks close to her home along the trip. It was a long trip, but they persevered. Eno, with a sudden shock in her stomach, every time she felt like they were closer to her house. It was a natural feeling. Her fear for her stepmother was something indescribable that would send shivers down her spine. The queen continued to ask her to mention any landmark that was closer to her home so they do not miss the direction. She felt lost and afraid, knowing she was going back to that house and had to face her stepmother, who had been nothing but the bane of her existence. Finally, they made it closer to the compound of her home. As they got closer, the queen looked a bit disturbed, looking at what she thought was a familiar face standing next to the hut, chopping firewood. The queen exclaimed, "Wait a minute, is that not Treba?" looking at the chief guard. The chief guard responded, "Yes, she looks very much like her." Eno and the prince looked at each other in confusion. The queen exclaimed, "Treba!" Mama Esi stood, shocked, wondering who knew her name. She was so surprised that someone knew her around there and could call her by that name. As they entered the compound, the guards surrounded the house. Mama Esi tried to escape, but the guards caught her and brought her before the queen and the prince. The queen then exclaimed, "So this is where you have been hiding all these years, Treba?" She asked Eno, "Is this the stepmother you spoke of?" Eno responded yes, as she nodded her head. Mama Esi was quiet. Then the prince asked, "Who is this woman? And why did you call her by another name?" A question he asked the queen. The queen said, "It's a long story." They had arrested Mama Esi, and the queen gave them an order to all return to the palace. She was handcuffed and taken along with Eno. While they got to the palace, the queen proceeded to tell the prince the story of how the king mysteriously died after eating a certain meal that was given to him by a then servant girl. That girl was Treba, aka Mama Esi, years ago. After the king died, they proceeded to look for her, but to no avail. She had suddenly disappeared and left them with so many unanswered questions. The prince became furious and demanded that she be punished. The queen agreed and emphasized that Treba would surely receive her punishment. Before then, she is calling for a meeting of the entire village. She has an announcement to make. She called the chief linguist to inform him to give this information to the town crier about an important meeting in the townspeople, telling him This is a mandatory meeting and every head of household in Jukwa should commit to ensuring that everyone attends. The town crier made it to the market square, calling the attention of everyone around by beating his metal gong loudly. As everyone gathered around, he announced, "The Queen Mother, Her Royal Majesty Efiba Yanka, has ordered everyone to be at the town square today by 3 p.m. for an urgent meeting with the Council of Elders. Every head of house should ensure every member of his household is present, even the rats in your cupboards. This is an important announcement." The people murmured among themselves, "What could this be about for everyone's presence to be needed?" Well, we will find out later in the day. As the time approached, people began to gather in the town square, closing their shops, rushing from the marketplace, as those who went to the farm hurried back quickly. They crowded together, still murmuring in anticipation for what was this important news. The Queen and the Council of Elders finally arrived. Seated next to her was the prince, looking radiant and handsome in his royal regalia, stealing glances at Eno as she stood beside one of the palace guards. The chief linguist then began speaking, making it known that the Queen had an announcement and everybody should remain quiet. But before then, she called out for Treba, aka Mama Esi, to be brought in front of everyone. She was dragged by the palace guards to the front of the crowd and made to kneel in front of the Queen. Among the whisperings of the crowd, they were shocked. Then the Queen then spoke, and she said that years ago, when the king died, it had been investigated and found out that she was the one. Everyone was suddenly shocked. Was this the person who did it? Murmuring among themselves. They all gasped in a shocked tone. The palace maid who attended to him before his demise, the Queen continued, had finally been found, and she pointed at Treba. The crowd gasped in fear to this shocking news. After all these years, where was she? Who was hiding her? What happened? So many unanswered questions. The Queen then proceeded to mention that her punishment would be that she would be unalived. The Council of Elders agreed. She asked Treba for her last words before she went to get her punishment. Treba then exclaimed, "It was the king's brother who asked me to do it. He helped me to escape after the king died. I did not do this alone. I will not be punished alone." The prince was shocked. He turned to his uncle in awe and exclaimed, "Guards, arrest him." He tried to run, but they got him and bound his arms. The Queen was equally in shock. The king's brother then exclaimed, "I deserve the throne, not my brother. I was cheated, so I took revenge. I do not regret it. He deserved to be unalived." The Queen just gave him a very good slap and reminded him that she was the one who begged the king to keep him in the palace to protect him after he unalived a man because of a bar of gold. The Queen exclaimed, "Ejiri did not deserve that. He had a family." Just then, Eno was stunned with all that she had heard. Her father's name was Ejiri. She thought back to the time her father had passed away. Just before then, he was frantically looking for a bar of gold, which he mentioned was given to him for safekeeping. Not long after that, he went to the farm and never came back. Unu wanted to speak, but her voice quivered. Then she found the courage to speak. She exclaimed, "My father was called Ejiri. Before he passed, he frantically looked for a bar of gold he had kept at home. He could not find it till his demise." The Queen, shocked, exclaimed, "Your father was Ejiri?" She began to cry. It's like words failed her, and memories of that time flooded her with emotions she had no control over. She finally calmed down and went to Eno, held her, and said, Eno, you will be well compensated for your loss. The captives were sent away, Mama Esi and the uncle of the prince. Eno cried as she saw how her stepmother was dragged away. Mixed emotions filled her heart, some of relief, some of pain, knowing the last person she saw as family was also going. Days passed, weeks. Eno could not find the strength to move on with life. One day the prince visited her in her home, asking her to gather her things and come along with him. The queen had asked for her presence in the palace. Eno hesitated, yet who did she have now in this life? She packed up her things and asked the prince for a little help. He then called the guards to help her clear out of the home anything that she had no need for, and put aside everything that she wanted to take along. As they roamed through the corners of the house, the prince heard Eno scream. As he rushed to her side, he saw her sitting on the floor of Mama Isi's room, holding a box with a bar of gold inside. She wondered, could this have been what my father had looked for? Exclaiming, the prince asked, where did you find it? She stretched her hand and pointed under the bed. She realized her stepmother had it all along and watched her father get unalived. Another set of emotions rushed into her heart. She thought to herself, why was she like this? What at all was she looking for in this life? As she cried frantically. The prince calmed her down, took her out of the room. The guards finished cleaning up and they all left, along with the gold, to the palace. When they got to the palace, the queen saw that Eno looked distraught. So she inquired, is something the matter? Eno tried to speak, but her voice quivered. The prince explained that while they gathered her things and cleaned up the house, they found a bar of gold under the bed of her stepmother. Eno believes it's the same one that her father looked for before his demise. Eno could not hold back her tears. The queen was shocked again. Is there something else that will shock me again? She exclaimed. Trevor had the gold all along? Why is she like this? Ever so chasing what works only for her, what puts her interest first? Why would you watch a man look for something that you knew you had? Is there something else beyond this? She watched your father look for it, and she has stolen it all along? She shook her head in disbelief. She was getting furious. She felt so much empathy for Eno and her family. The queen calmed down and said, Eno, this bar of gold is yours. Eno, full of tears, thanked the queen and was taken away to a room reserved for her. Months later, the prince had made known his intentions of wanting to marry Eno to the queen. The queen had no reservations about their union. Eno was informed by the queen and had gotten used to being around them. They already felt like family. She agreed and they married in a lovely ceremony surrounded by royalty. A while after that, Eno put to bed and welcomed a beautiful set of twins, a boy and a girl, to the excitement of both the queen and the prince. A new heir was at last born. There were two owls who were sitting on a tree. They had something to say. A while back, the prince had given them the power to speak. One of them exclaimed, just so you know, Mama Isi was the one who pushed the twin sister into the well. After she discovered that Mama Isi had the gold her father had frantically looked for before his demise, it was hiding in a pot in Mama Isi's box under her bed. The twin confronted her stepmother. Realizing that she was caught, Mama Isi pushed her into the well to silence her. Her wickedness really knew no bounds. So, if you love this story as I do, please go ahead and subscribe, like and comment. Which part of the story did you like best? And what lessons do you take from this? Thank you.